All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Wild and Precious Optimal Living Show. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Sam McDonald.
And I am the lovely Dr. Lynn.
And welcome. Thanks for joining us today. So, we are super duper excited to present to you today's show. And as always, our shows are brought to you and sponsored by Shed Light Cold Lasers. Phenomenal companies that we use their product every single day. And as always, I talk about this, the biggest value of this company is the support group that comes behind it, because the laser is just a tool, but the knowledge that behind it is what really separates it from everything else. And I think it's just truly an incredible device. It's changed our practice. We get better results than we ever have, so I can't say enough great things about this company.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Even as practitioners, what we know and the success stories that we have, that we get to share with our practice members, really stems from the knowledge base that we get and the connections we have from the community from Shed Light. So.
Most definitely. Cool. So, for our guest today, I'm super stoked and super excited about this, and we have the wonderful, the lovely Dr. Jeri LeVine, hailing from some other part of the country than she's normally in. She's in Florida today, folks. She's moving, she's wheeling and dealing all over the place. But a little bit about Dr. Jeri. So we had a chance to actually get introduced to her work through the community that we're part of, the International Association for Functional Neurology Rehabilitation. And she's going to be talking today about Irlen therapy, or Irlen syndrome. And you may not know what that is. You may not have ever heard of. So we're going to give you a super crash course into this today. And before we jump into the mindset piece, I just want to share a little story, because I got to meet her in person when I was at the training this last couple weeks ago. And I think the coolest thing that we did was this arrow break, and literally breaking an arrow with your neck, which sounds crazy. Sounds like, how are you still alive?
And it's not the end of it, though, right? It's the actual point.
You're actually putting the point to your windpipe right there, and it's like, wait, what? Like, not sideways, but the point to your throat? Yes. Yes, you are. And you're going to break it. And we did. And it's all about what your mind can overcome, perceiving past these limitations we put on ourselves. So, Dr. Lynn, share us a little bit more about the mindset that we're going to be diving into today.
Oh, yeah. So, for, right now we're getting up to the voting, right? Close to the dates are really close.
Election day is coming.
Election day, that's the word. I was just like brain fart right there. So election day is here, and I know that there's tensions really high. We may be really caught up with stressors, and there's times I wonder for you if you ever feel like you're stuck in a loop, where it's that you think about a story and then you feel pissed off, or you think about something and you feel annoyed, or you're feeling like you're constantly having to worry about the same thing over and over again, and you try to do something but you just can't. You're just stuck in that loop. One of the fun ways that I like to do, I like to shift up and change the pattern, is to do something totally radical and different and silly. And with the spirit of the Halloween holiday coming up this weekend, one thing that I like to do, and Sam and I have done other activities. We'll do two today. So one is giving your most evil laugh ever. So this is, for instance, so for a moment, you take a breath, and then you're feeling tense, and all of a sudden it's
I love it.
There's another one though, right? It's one that can you laugh without smiling, and that's a fun one.
Jeri, you ever tried this?
No, I have never tried this.
Okay, this is guaranteed without fail to make you authentically laugh.
Yeah.
Like So what you're going to do is you're going to try and laugh, but you're going to laugh without smiling.
We'll do it together.
Oh, yeah.
So, laugh without smiling.
One.
Okay, we'll do it. 1, 2, 3.
And you can't help but
you have to do it boldly, Jeri.
You can't help but break out to the giggles.
Awesome. I love that.
What's something that you like to do to just kind of break the attention for yourself? You just touch
So,
yourself.
well, I was thinking about this. There's a couple of different things, and I tend to look at things from a hemispheric kind of viewpoint, right? So if it's from a right brain perspective, I think that reaching out and helping somebody else, like getting out of my own space and helping somebody do something in theirs, I think will really help me and really kind of shifts my mood and takes my focus off those things that are really bothering me. And then when it feels like responsibility and it feels heavy, and from more of a left brain kind of perspective, I will make a list on one side of the page of all the things that are bothering me and all the things that I just can't get through. And then on the other side, it has to be the pivot, right? It has to be the opposite of that. So if this is where I am, where do I want to be with that, right? And shift that energy into a more positive direction. And those two, depending on where I am and what's bothering me, will usually kind of pick things up.
I love that.
Nice.
Yeah, I do a similar kind of thing when, things when it's getting heavy, you're getting stressed out, and it's just like, just step back and realize, look, this person's coming to me for help, and at the end of the day, and sometimes this is what happens, is this person, they're praying for help. They're praying and they're wanting a solution to their problem, and it's like, you're that solution. You're the answer to their prayer. And just stepping up into that and saying, okay, I can help this person. I don't know how much I can, but I know I can do something for them. And that totally shifts it and makes it about them instead of about me. I love that. So let's dive in, Jeri. Let's talk about what you're doing, why you're traveling all across the country. What is it that you're bringing awareness to people, and what's with the cool glasses?
So one of the things, so I do lots of different things. I am a psychologist, or that's what I've been the longest. And I just got to the point in my practice where I don't want to spend the next 6 months talking about your mama. Like, right? We want to get in there and we want to shift what's happening in the brain, and we want better connectivity, and we want everything to work so that your mother is no longer the focus and you can go do what you want with your life, right? I mean, that's the plan. And so one of the things that I have in the practice, it's Erlin syndrome is where this started. And Helen Erlin was a psychologist in California and was working with color and different frequencies of light and that kind of thing. And what she discovered was that some of us don't process light correctly. And because we don't process light correctly, it can cause all kinds of issues. It can cause distortions on a page. It can make a page blurry, or it can make it hard to track, hard to keep your eyes in the right place. Some people, letters start to fade or swirl or move around. And then also it can affect with anxiety or depression. The visual, what is typically called the visual components of dyslexia, even though dyslexia really doesn't have visual components, but there's some visual processing stuff that got lumped in with that. So definitely those tracking, those reading issues a lot of times. Headaches and migraines, if a headache is light, heat, or stress induced, then Erlin lenses will typically remove those headaches. Depth perception is a big one. For me especially, like, this person cannot get on an escalator. If I don't have my lenses on or my contacts in, I have no idea where to put my foot. And I put my lenses on, or I put my Erlin contacts in, and honey, I think I'm Beyonce going down the escalator. It's so easy, right? I could just get on and go. And so when we don't process light correctly, what we want to do is find those frequencies of light that we're not processing correctly. And we go through and we test different lenses and different frequencies of light. We call it color, but all color is just a different frequency of light, right? And so we have lenses made then with the frequencies that we have trouble processing. And my brain works. I mean, it's so simple.
Wow.
So how long have you been doing this, and how did you get turned towards starting to dive deeper? So moving from psychology to something that it sounds like something like optometrists would be doing. How did those fields converge, and then is it really you know, what are some practitioners that's actually utilizing this to support their clientele and families?
Okay, so my mom, Dr. Gwen Moore, was in one of the very first groups that Helen Erlin ever trained like 30 years ago. And I was already in grad school. She came back and she said, you know, Jeri, this is so weird, let's just try it. Well, I'm on medication for ADHD, even though I've never been formally diagnosed because, you know, physicians, here, hon, take a pill. And I'm on medication for anxiety, which I desperately needed. And so she came back from training with Helen and she screened me and we went through the process. We had lenses made. And in 3 months, I'm off all medication and my grades are higher than they've ever been. And it was such an easy fix, you know? It was just, it's not everything, but it was a big chunk of what was going on for me. And so I worked with her and worked with her for a long time. I would do the screening and do the initial testing and added that part to my practice and then send patients onto her for lenses. And then as time progressed, then I went to California and trained with Helen, added it to my practice. I work with kids and adults and, you know, I'm not anti-medication, but I would like it used correctly. And so when we have a situation, about 46 to 48% of those who have been diagnosed with a learning disability or dyslexia have Erlin to some extent. And about 35% of those with ADHD have Erlin to some extent. And a third of both of those groups has been completely misdiagnosed. Because if the page moves or the white's glary and the letters don't sit still and the anxiety starts to rise and you can't look at the page, of course it looks like ADD. But sometimes it's just the processing. 70% of autism, 80% of head injuries and whiplash, 20% of gifted good readers in general population. So it's a chunk of our population that are just either misdiagnosed or undiagnosed and struggling and working too hard. And so it was a really nice thing to add, whether I was doing talk therapy or I was doing tutoring, or now in functional neurology, in the IAFNR presentation, there's a wonderful video of the Singapore clinic. And they show the difference that the lenses made just with balance. And so, you know, anything that I can do that gets my patients to where they want to be faster, I'm on board, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a chunk of my population that have this, but man, it can just make such a huge difference. And it's nice to have one thing in the practice that's fast.
Right. Well, you've explained so much before too with when I listened to your lecture about the Erlin syndrome, and what's really shocking to me is it sounds like this could make such a difference in so many different kids and adults, and yet it's the first time I've ever heard about the Erlin syndrome, and it doesn't seem like it's known. I mean, when people talk about dyslexia, there's no conversation about, oh, potentially it could be Erlin syndrome. And how did Helen Erlin come across, you know, how was she able to discover that color lenses could do so much? Like, what was her process or that came to be into this actual condition?
Well, Helen has an autistic son.
Okay.
And she noticed when she was working with him, different colored paper, different colored lighting in the room, different colored pens and pencils, all of that color made a difference. And he would be more productive and more focused and attend better, less fatigued with certain colors than others. And so that kind of got the ball rolling for her. Helen is an amazing researcher.
Yeah.
She amazing. I mean, she's so fascinating. She's 74 and she still runs everything, and she's so brilliant. And she just, you give her just an idea of something and man, she runs with it, right? And so just knowing that different colors and different frequencies and different lighting made such a difference for him, she thought, this can't be a one-off.
Yeah.
Right? There has to be something bigger. She happened to be at UCLA at the time and needing a research project, and so boom, right? Here we go.
That worked out perfectly.
Yeah, it was great.
Well, that's awesome. And so for kiddos that you're working with, are you using your, it's no longer not just talk therapy. For psychology, you normally think about talk therapy, but it's more brain training, right? And is this something for just for our listeners, for understanding these lenses? Is it something that it's consistently? I guess let's jump back. As a psychologist, how are you actually integrating this for your clients as well too? Are you doing some education training? Because I know that you have a PhD in education too.
Right. So yes, definitely some education training. I like to work with schools when I can. My whole job, at least with this part of the practice, is to get it out there.
Yeah.
Erlin's in 46 countries.
Okay.
We have diagnosticians in 46 countries. We don't have enough, and we're not well known. But man, it's not for lack of effort on my part. I promise. I'm working to get it out there. Right.
Yeah.
I'm even working in Ghana now. I have a group that I went and trained to screen, and then the man who runs that nonprofit has gone back to school, and he's getting his master's in special education there so that we can move him into a diagnostician position eventually. So it's one of those things that crosses all the barriers. We either process light well or we don't. And so when I have somebody come in, so now I do a lot more functional neurology. We still do talk sometimes, but I'm working with a lot of other issues as well, working with a lot of pain, and getting to come at anxiety and schizoaffective and some of those kinds of issues from a totally different perspective, and I just love it.
Yeah.
So I use the cold lasers. I use shed light laser and neurosage, a lot of kinesiology and NET and that kind of work. I mean, any way to make better connectivity. And one of the things with Erlin that's so exciting to me right now is we're doing some research with Cornell University.
Awesome.
And they have, so we've done some initial studies and can see the difference in just a 15-minute turnaround, the difference in an fMRI with and without lenses, and how hard the brain's working and the areas that are overworked and that kind of thing. And then past that, we've got some really nice new information showing how when the brain processes light correctly, how connectivity is so much better, and how areas of the brain that aren't connecting otherwise begin to with the lenses. And that's brilliant to me and helps with everything else I'm doing, because the more connectivity, the more I can keep them in their bodies and with me, the more I can get done. So it's a really simple procedure. There's a very simple way to determine if somebody's a good candidate or not for testing, and it's one of the few things that I can do with someone that's quick. In my field, there aren't a lot of quick answers. You've got to give me some time. You've got to let me get in there. You've got to let me work with this. And with Erlin, it's 1 or 2 appointments. And here we go. And so I really like having one fast answer, especially for a child who's really struggling in school or an adult who's really struggling to maintain. It's nice to have one thing that's quick.
Definitely. So as a parent, I'm sure you hear a lot of different, parents coming in with different complaints and things like that. But as a parent, how would I know if Erlin lenses are going to be a good fit for my kid? Like, what will my kiddo maybe describing to me, or what? Oh, did we just lose her? I think we just lost her. So sorry about that, folks. We will get her back up momentarily, but hope you guys are enjoying the show so far. And like I said, diving deep into understanding what's happening with Erlin lenses, and
there we go.
There we go. All right, with what's happening, and so we're going to find out more about how maybe this can be more applicable to you parents and even other adults. So we'll let her get booted back up and get rolling here again. No worries.
It's okay.
I don't know what happened. I got lost.
It's okay. It's technology. We all have issues with it, and it sometimes wants to give us problems right back. So no problem. Anyway, I was in the middle of asking Jeri. So as a parent, or even as an adult, you kind of mentioned words swirling on the page, or a kid maybe diagnosed with ADHD. So first of all, as a parent, what would my kiddo be telling me, or what may be they experiencing that I might think, oh, hey, maybe this is Irlen syndrome?
So when fighting over homework is an issue, when they struggle with reading or staying focused, when they fatigue really quickly, it's really interesting when I hear people, I've got this great book and I'm really wanting to read it, and I get 2 pages in and I'm sound asleep. Well, reading's not supposed to be a sedative. So if reading makes you sleepy, then absolutely that's something we want to look at. If they come home with a headache or a stomach ache, or if they get dizzy or car sick, if they have trouble with depth perception, if learning to ride a bike is difficult, or catching a ball or hitting a ball, those kinds of things, then it's definitely something that we want to look into.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. I'm super curious for myself, just because reading has always been a sedative for me. It's always been easy to just knock out with any book.
I was going to say the same for myself, and I also am curious, is it something that you can develop as you get older too, just for whatever reason? Because I feel like more recently in these last couple of years, it feels harder for me to sit down and read. That it could be because I'm such a busy mom, but but also part of it is just like, well, what part can it regress? Can you develop this over time, and it's not necessarily something that's
that you're born with.
Born with, congenital, yeah.
Well, definitely a head injury, right, can bring on symptoms of somebody who absolutely didn't have it before. Yeah. I think a lot of times what happens is that perhaps there's a hereditary component in this a lot of times, and maybe there was just a little bit and somebody's able to compensate, and there's not too much stress, and there's not too much life, and there's not too much responsibility, and so the compensation skills kind of average out, right? And especially the higher IQ, the better we compensate typically. And then I think sometimes, like you said, as we get older and there's more responsibility and there's more pressure and there's more stress, I think that it gets more difficult to compensate, right? And to keep all those plates spinning at the same time. And so what may have been there all along is just a whole lot easier to see when the stress level's higher.
Yeah, that's true. So could you walk us through the process? You mentioned that it takes about 2 visits to really help to identify if a person's struggling from Irlen syndrome, and then matching them with a lens. So walk us through what that looks like in general.
Okay, so typically before I see anybody, I have them go to efficientbrain.com and take the Irlen self-test. That's my website. Or they can go to the Irlen website, IRLEN.com, and take the self-test there. It's about 4 pages. It's just yes or no's. Not every section applies to every person. There's a section about driving and playing an instrument and that kind of thing. But I like it because it gives you a really broad idea of what areas that this can affect. And any place somebody has a yes answer on there, that's a place that lenses are going to make a difference. So I don't ever screen anybody who doesn't have this, because if they have yes answers, then I already know for sure they have it. It's the best vetting tool I've ever had for any test that I give. And then they come into the office or I go to them, depending, for a screening. So we go through the initial screening, and then what I have them do, I have them answer some questions and do some activities for me, some tasks, so that I can really kind of irritate those visual processing centers, try to fatigue them, and see what our symptoms are. Because somebody can have 1 symptom or somebody can have 8 symptoms. It's not, it's on a scale, right? Mild, moderate to severe. And then once we see what the symptoms are and what's happening, then we find the right colored overlay to put over the page or over the screen which calms the brain down, calms the page down, allows for better tracking, for better focus, those kinds of things. And then once somebody's been screened, if we decide that color makes a difference, if the overlay makes a difference, then they're a really good candidate for lenses. And overlays are great if you're reading, but they don't help with copying from the board or doing math or writing an essay. And this will even change handwriting sometimes. I mean, it's so amazing the different ways light affects us. And so when they come in for a lens eval, we go through, we find first our density, where the level where we want to start a frequency, and then we just keep working until we find the exact combination for that particular brain. And one thing that really is interesting to me is after, 30 years, 70% of the orders that go into Long Beach, where Erlin International is, for the lenses to be made, over 70% of those orders are completely individual. And I've been doing this for, well, gosh, I worked with Mom doing this for years, and then I've been doing this for at least 18 years. And I have tinted thousands of people, and I cannot guarantee that I've ever had two people in exactly the same combination. It is so individual.
Wow.
And it's nice because then it's all the light all the time, right? So it doesn't matter if you're driving or copying from the board or trying to hit a baseball or a golf ball or, right?
Right.
So can the light process change after you match a person with a specific color?
Yes.
Do you have to check it every so often?
You check it every so often. Helen Erlin suggests that people get tested every 12 months. I tend to tell people, call me when they're not working, right? Because if you have this, you know the minute color has changed. So, and different things will affect that. So puberty, because anytime brain chemistry changes, right? So puberty will affect it. Menopause will affect it. A head injury, stressors, I had one family that I had tested the whole family. We did the mom and the dad and 2 kids, and we found everybody's color, and they didn't order right away. It was maybe 2 months or 3 months, and then they called me and said, okay, now we're ready to move forward. And I said, okay, great, send me the frames, and I'll send everything to California. And they got their lenses back, and nobody's color was correct.
Oh, wow.
And I'm pretty good at this, man. I mean, I've been doing this a while, right? And so I'm thinking, what the heck? So, and the mom's just looking at me like, you don't know what you're doing. And so we got back together, and I redid everybody's color, and everybody's color had shifted at least a little bit. And so we started talking. Well, they'd all gone keto. They had been completely off gluten and sugar for 2 months. And it totally changed brain chemistry.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting, right? How, and I think some people are more sensitive than others.
Yeah.
And I think some people will shift more easily than others. But I thought that was really fascinating, that how much it had changed for them, just removing some of that inflammation, right, from the brain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Have you ever had anybody that's got, I guess first of all, are the lenses the same for both eyes? And do you ever have anybody that's got different colored lenses?
I sometimes wind up tinting eye to eye.
Wow.
And typically they're pretty close. So it's not a big shift from one to the other. I do have a couple of patients, and I adore them. And I have one teacher especially that one lens is a very, very light blue, and the other one is a very intense blue.
Oh, wow.
And I have to be honest, it's kind of hard for me to look at her because it kind of messes with my head a little bit. But I mean, it changed her whole world. And so we wound up moving her into contacts, because with the contacts, they color just the pupils, so you don't see the color.
Yeah.
And then that way, it wasn't quite so an optical illusion.
So jarring for everybody.
Do you do the lenses match? Because people come in and they have prescriptions too. And so is the tint a layover? Like, a tint over the actual prescription of the lens itself. So then,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so Erlin will do a lens that has no prescription, or they can fill any prescription, a single vision, a bifocal, a progressive, and they fill the prescription and then they add the tint.
Ah, so then it sounds like this could be, I mean, both Sam and I are like, we really want to get this done for ourselves too.
Definitely.
And so, because even as I'm right now, I'm like sitting here in the room and the light's so bright, and I'm like, how am I putting in more energy in terms of staying focused, or like looking at the computer screen and like,
I just want to read and not fall asleep.
Yeah,
I'm like,
right.
I can't even imagine what that's like, right? I can
Right.
sit down and read a book and
yeah.
I'm like not knocking out right there,
Right.
man.
and so what are some populations that could really benefit from this? Because all of a sudden I'm thinking people who struggle from TBI, traumatic brain injury, concussions,
kiddos,
ADD,
all
all those. So
Right.
really just a wide gamut. And again, it's shocking that it's still so little known about it in terms of being as accessible in that sense, what you're talking about. So what type of populations do you see, and then who can really also benefit from this in general? It sounds like it should be a general screening for everybody.
Well, that's typically what I do is when I have a new patient come in,
Yeah.
that self-test just goes into that initial packet, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And a lot of the doctors that I work with, they'll do the same thing. I used to do a lot of testing, and I don't love it. So, but I still have friends that do psychological batteries, and so they will. I'm really thankful that I have some really aware psychologists that I get to work with in Atlanta, because when they get to a point in a psychological, they won't give a diagnosis until until the child has seen me, because they don't want to diagnose as ADD or dyslexic or whatever if that's not what it is. Right? And so it's really interesting. I'll have those families that come in and they're polite. We're in Atlanta, so they're pretty polite, but I'm clearly wasting 2 hours of their lives they're never going to get back.
Yeah.
And by the time we're done, I'm looking for more tissue. Everybody's crying because Johnny's never read like that before, right? And it's so nice to have those kinds of opportunities. I work with professional athletes who want better eye-hand coordination. I have an Olympic speed skater right now that we just put in lenses, and she won her last 2 trials.
Wow.
So in this last week, which was really exciting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I work with CEOs who are looking for 2 more hours out of the day. They want to be sharper. They want to be clearer. Autistic community. I'm a head injury. I had been in lenses anyway, and 6.5 years ago, I had a really bad car accident, and my color changed drastically, my vision changed drastically, but I know that it was part of what allowed me to heal more quickly, was not having that extra stress and not working, that much harder all the time to get everything done. And then at the same time, I work with a lot of gifted students. The student that does really well with grades but doesn't test well, or has to spend too many hours doing homework, can't get everything done fast enough, and it has nothing to do with intelligence. I've got surgeons all over the Southeast in lenses because they get headaches from the lights in the operating room, right? So it's literally just those of us that can't process the light.
Yeah, and I'm curious then too now, because we all study the same thing, where you are all interested in the Malilo method, and all really, you talked about NeuroSage. We use NeuroSage in our office, which for those of you who are not familiar, it's this wonderful video game platform that is really incorporates into the world of functional neurology and offering color therapy, sound therapy, all simultaneously to help co-activate or stimulate specific areas of the brain as we're trying to rehab after identifying these delays and deficits. So, Jeri, you use NeuroSage, you use the Avant laser, or the shed light laser, just like we do. I'm curious, as you're studying the hemisphericity of the brain, like the difference between left and right side, as you mentioned, a family who changes their diet with keto diet, all of a sudden the colors change. So we are working with kiddos that are also struggling, who are ADD, ADHD, and the autism spectrum, or tics, and they, as their chemistry of their brain or the function of their brain changes, then I would imagine that so does the lens color as well too. So how are you adjusting as the brain is starting to change as well too, as you're incorporating functional neurology for these patients, and then at the same time, how, you know, are you checking often, and how are you bringing into the world of like imbalances in general between the left and right side? Sorry, our kiddos with us too, so we get we get interrupted. Yeah, so I'm just curious about how does that work hand in hand with understanding the development of the brain as well too. How does this play a role in primitive reflexes, or how does this play a role in cerebellar function and left and right side personalities of the brain, things like that. So can you maybe give us a big picture of how that all fits in together with maybe the work of Dr. Melillo's method?
Well, so really interesting. I went to New York last month and tinted Rob and his wife and two of their adult kids, right? And so that was really interesting. And I'm so thrilled that he wants to explore this more. Yeah. Because I really don't believe in this moment that there's a hemispheric component to the frequencies of light. And he does. So this is going to be really interesting to see.
So I was curious about that,
But that's the fun part in this for me, right? And I'm so excited that this community has gotten interested in this as well, because most of the people that are Erlen screeners and Erlen diagnosticians are, at least in this country, are more educators. And they're incredibly well educated in their fields, but neuropsychology isn't part of what they know or do. It's not part of their background. And so I love that there's more of a neuropsych kind of component in this, and the functional neurology just gives this, I think is going to really open this up. Already there's a lot, there's some nice research we're working on now with cerebellum response and changes there, brainstem responses, changes there, frontal lobe activity, those kinds of things, connectivity throughout the brain, which is really exciting. I've not done a lot with primitive reflexes, but definitely an area that we have started looking more into and seeing if color will change that instinct and allow the brain to inhibit those better.
And maybe this is a little bit deeper in terms of really just knowing, like, for instance, the left side of the brain is more focused on, if you have a left brain weakness, then you would use like a more of a red color tint, and then if you have a right brain weakness, it's like a more of a blue color tint. In order to do, the way we utilize that in the office is to actually stimulate those weaker aspects. So we alter between those two color lenses. So what if a person were to test with a tint that is redder, but then they may have like a right brain weakness, which would generally you would use a blue tint, blue color lens. How is that for just, you know, for this is the nerd in me, but how does that work for the lenses?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest with you, and doing some experimentation between having patients come in, and we're doing some testing and some evaluating with their lenses on, and then have them test and evaluate, do work with, like you said, with the appropriate colored lens, depending on where the area of deficit is. And so we just recently started playing with all of this. Is like a brand new field for me, right?
Yeah.
Being able to pull this in as part of it, And so we've got a couple of little experiments going between the more hemispheric model of color versus what actually that particular brain needs.
Yeah.
And so as soon as I have some hard data, I will share, because we're constantly working with that now to see what we can find. And luckily, all my friends are scotopic, have Erlen syndrome for the most part, and so it's like, great, I need you in this experiment, come play. So they're getting laser and neurosage and all kinds of stuff, and so it's fun. We're having fun with it.
That's awesome. So a person that's wearing one of these lenses, it's 24/7, or like they're wearing it pretty much all day as they're going about their day, because it looks like you're wearing some.
I am. I have my lenses on.
Yeah.
One pair of them at least. It kind of depends on the person. I have people that really feel like they only need them when they're doing visual processing, when they're on the computer, when they're working, when they're in school, when they're studying. If I am vertical, I have my contacts in or I have my lenses on, because I want my brain to be calm all of the time. And I want to feel comfortable, and you know, I want to take care of this. This is pretty much all I got. So I want to keep as healthy brain-wise as I possibly can. And so, yes, I tend to wear mine consistently all the time.
Gotcha.
Wonderful. I'm curious too, because we talked about, you can obviously regress in life and get worse, and then you need to update those lenses. Have you seen it go the other way, where somebody's like, I don't seem to need these anymore?
I have patients who have said that to me.
Yeah.
Who have said, I don't really feel like color makes that much of a difference. I think they're compensating in different ways.
Yeah.
I have been in practice for myself for almost 30 years, and I have done neurofeedback for 20 years, and I have done Erlen, and I've done therapies, and now laser and neurosage. And I have to be honest, I believe that if I could functional neurology my way out of this,
Yep.
I think I might have done that.
Yeah.
So another reason I'm excited that this population has gotten interested and wants to do some work with this, because absolutely, if this just becomes something to get us to a better place, I'm fine with that.
Right.
And if there's a way to do that, then I would like to see how those pieces can work together a little better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely other things we've seen too, where it's like, well, like in chiropractic, we call it just limitation of matter, right? This is how you're born. Genetics play a certain part into that, and also just, your certain lifestyle factors affect that too. And if it's one of these wonderful tools that's out there that, like you said, hey, can just offload some stress to the brain, I mean, it's certainly wonderful to have it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And circling back, I don't think I was able to get the answer, but if we're working on a person and their brain, their neurology starts to change, so that means we're also at the same time having to assess new lenses. This person's going to get new lenses over time as well too, because their brain function is different. And is there potential then, as their neurology starts to change, that this can create some side effects or maybe some unwanted effects, or it's not as helpful then as the person's making these changes?
Well, I think as brain chemistry shifts, I think sometimes color shifts. So an old combination or an old frequency combination, which was great 6 months ago, is now like, I can't put these on my face, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, and that happens for sure with me. And so we tweak the color, and we can typically just send them back to California, and they'll bleach it out and retint for us. I typically don't have somebody who goes from something very, very cool color to something very, very warm. So typically it may shift, but we kind of stay in the same families. And so we just send them back, we reevaluate, we send them back to Erlen, they'll change out the lens or redo it for us, and then we just see how long, and everybody's a little different. I've had people that really needed color changed often more than twice a year. And then I have people that we're doing the same thing. We're doing all of this functional neurology and color never changes. So it's really interesting to me how it works or doesn't work or whatever, you know.
Right. So I love stories. So I'd love to hear you share a couple of your coolest stories that you've seen happen with, you know, patients across the age spectrum. What are some cool stuff that you've seen?
So I had, this was years ago.
Yeah.
So I had a boy that I worked with. He was in the 8th grade, and I did a lot, when I was still in school, I did a lot of tutoring, right? Because that was kind of a bread and butter kind of job.
Yeah.
And so, because there's a test or a paper due every day in some class. So so he was in 8th grade, and in Atlanta, they have, one of the private schools especially is very sports oriented. And it's also academically very strenuous. And Dad went to that school, and Granddad went to that school, and now he has to go to that school, and he's just really not equipped for that type of education. It's not where he should be, but it was a social thing, and so he had to go.
Yeah.
And they had hired me to tutor him, and I'm seeing this kid like 5 days a week to keep him in this private school and keep the grades up. And she's paying me a fortune for tutoring, and I'm like, let me do lenses. And no, that's too weird, we can't do that. So I keep him, we work all the way, now we're in the 11th grade, and I can't get his SAT score up high enough because Daddy went to Georgia and Granddaddy went to Georgia, and he has to go to Georgia because he's 6'8", he's 285 pounds.
Goodness.
They want him to play on the line.
Oh, wow.
And I can't get his SAT score up high enough. I mean, they can't even build a library to get him in. I can't get his score up, right? And so finally his mom says, Jeri, just do that stupid color thing. And so I said, okay, great. So I'm telling him, don't worry, they're just going to look like a pair of sunglasses. It's no big deal. He winds up in my 2 darkest layers of Barbie pink.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they could not be pinker, right? And I'm thinking, great, his mother is going to shoot me in the head. And so we get his lenses made. His mother is furious. We get his lenses made, and his SAT score goes up 450 points.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So he got in Georgia.
Yep.
He played all 4 years on the line. He was so cute. When he was a sophomore, I called him and I said, Bartley, they can do contacts now. You don't have to wear pink glasses anymore. And he's like, Jeri, everybody knows me by my pink glasses. And he would come back every summer. We'd reevaluate. His mother would sit there and pray that his color changed, and didn't. And he got married last summer, and I couldn't get to the wedding, and so they sent me a copy of the bridal party, and there's Bartley in his pink glasses. And he's working with Daddy in the big insurance firm downtown now, right? And I know that woman cusses me every day because here's this kid who's still in his pink glasses, but it changed his life.
Right.
Right? It was awesome. And I had a little boy that was horrible stutter, and just a really beautiful child, but 5th grade, and they are eating him alive, right? Because everything was, I mean, it was just painful to listen to him talk. And they came in for an appointment, and he had visual processing issues. School was hard, reading was hard. Definitely, I knew it would make a difference with some of this, but we worked and we worked, and we finally found the right lens combination. And so I had him hold up the lenses, and I said, how do they feel? And the mom had a baby with her, and so she's not paying super attention to us at this moment. And he goes, they feel great. And I was like, wait a minute, hold on.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I said, babe, tell me a story. And his mother whipped her head around and glared at me like, oh, how dare you? Because, you know, she knew how hard it was for him to talk. And he tells this long, convoluted story about they're in a parking lot and his door's not shut and she takes the corner too fast and he rolls out of the car into the, I mean, it was like this whole dramatic story. And he's holding the lenses up the whole time, and he doesn't stutter once. And he finishes that story, and she and I looked at each other, and we both just burst into tears because it was so amazing, right? So yeah, it's crazy the different ways that this can help.
Yeah, listening to your lecture that you did for IAFNR, which was a recent functional neurology summit, and you showed a couple of videos, and I just see a little kid. I remember reading, and it was either stuttering or he was really struggling just being able to read smoothly. And then you would put the lenses on, and then all of a sudden it was just no problem whatsoever. And so oftentimes I would imagine that how much strain that is for how emotionally straining for kids of not knowing. And teachers, they may be like, teachers are, or he's just being told he's a poor reader, and it may not be that he's a poor reader, like he could be, or like this student that you were just describing who stutters but is an amazing storyteller, and being able to have those gifts actually show up when a lot of these things like these symptoms are addressed. So I just imagine just the emotional strain that kids go through being labeled a certain way, or teachers not necessarily seeing that there's all these other aspects. It could be a visual thing, it could be an auditory thing, it could be a motor deficit that is affecting how the kid's doing these tasks that it's so easy to just say, label, like, oh, poor reader, and there's all these other aspects that come into it. So,
or lazy.
Right. Yeah.
If he just tried harder.
Right.
The reason I got involved in Ghana was when Padmore contacted Erlin International. Initially, I was in I just happened to be in Long Beach, and I'm sitting there with Sandy Costa, Helen's daughter, and she gets an email from this guy in Ghana. And in Ghana, if you're not doing well academically, they cane you.
Oh, wow.
Because you must just be lazy, right? And so they don't really understand learning disabilities. They're way behind the curve on these kinds of things, different kinds of learning styles and all that. And so he was like, this could change our whole education system, just as one little component for that whole population who needs this. So I told Sandy, I said, well, I'll go to Ghana with you. And she said, you'd go? And I'm like, yeah, I'll go. And she said, okay. And then I was home a couple of weeks later. She called. She said, I think the Ghana thing's going to work. And I'm like, really? We're going to Ghana? And she goes, no, you are. So I went. But it was great. Wow. We had a wonderful time.
Yeah. I remember from your presentation, too, you really hammered that home, because there's a slide where there's 4 circles, and you're looking at them, and it's like, hey, you ask, are these circles moving? And can you make them stop? And if people can't, then it's like really putting it in their face, like, well, just try harder. Well, why aren't you trying hard enough? And like you said, just really hammering that, because that is the case for, especially in very driven families. Like the example you gave, dad went to this school, son's got to go to this school, and you wanting your kids to perform. It becomes an issue, especially when it's like there's this limitation here on the brain that you put these on, that limitation goes away, and now, wow, the brain has all this function that can be accessed that wasn't available before. So it's just the coolest thing. Like I said, I'm just super excited. I still can't wait to get you out here and get tested, and like I said, and see what's going to happen and what's going to change, and putting some rose-colored glasses on me.
So with that said, we just want to be able to lay it out there. Maybe some of our listeners are practitioners. You could be educators, right? And I know that, Jeri, you are in this mission to be able to get Erlin out and let people know more about it. And so what are some ways that if people are interested in learning, do you have to have a certain license? Do you have to have a certain certification? Who can come to you to learn, to train, to be able to start to get this out there?
So as far as screening, then somebody just needs to have a 4-year degree in the right area, in education or psychology or medicine of some kind, chiropractic, those kinds of things. And then when somebody wants to become a diagnostician, which is that next level where you do the actual lens evaluations, She wants the background to be at least a master's or a doctorate in some field somewhere in health science, right? She just doesn't want an architect doing it, right? I mean, she wants somebody that has the right background, because you're going to run into other things besides just Erlen when you're working with somebody. So you want them to have the proper background.
Yeah. And we're super excited to be able to add this to our repertoire and our services and what we can offer. And so we're working with Jeri soon to be able to bring her into town, and we will maybe update some pictures, some videos as she's in town as we're doing some training. I think that'll be fun if you follow us on social media. With that said too, Jeri, how can people get a hold of you? What is the best way to get access to you and follow you in the social media world?
The best way to get in touch with me is to email. You can go to efficientbrain.com and send me an email through there.
Okay.
And that's probably the easiest way. I'm pretty accessible. I'm on social media, Facebook and Instagram. You can find me there as well, Efficient Brain. But the website may be the easiest place to connect, and just let me know how I can get back to you and how I can be of service. And if you're in an area, if somebody's in an area that's not convenient or difficult for us to get together, we'll find other people who do this. Another thing that people can do is go to the Erlen website, and there you can look for different practitioners, and they will, you can find somebody hopefully in your area. But I'm the one who's willing just to go anywhere and do anything. So if you can't find somebody close to you, then call me and I will figure out a way to get there.
Awesome. And we will be sure to post your contact information on our comments section of our Facebook Live today, so people can access that if they have more questions, and they can look for you. And anything else, Dr. Sam?
With this, no, I think we've covered a ton of information. So for parents out there, I mean, definitely consider this as, something else to investigate with your kiddo. And certainly, like we've talked about, something that can have a dramatic effect really fast. Is this everything? Absolutely not. But imagine, increasing your kid's ability in school to succeed by 30 or 40% just in a couple of visits. It's going to make a tremendous impact, especially as, like, working with us, you're starting to address a lot of these underlying neurological dysfunctions as well. So, I mean, to me, like I said, I'm all about better results as fast as we possibly can. So something, like you said, that can do it in a snap is awesome.
Yeah. And Jeri, any last words before we start to wrap up our show for today?
Well, I just so appreciate you guys having me on and letting me talk about one of the things I am most passionate in the world about.
It's obvious.
Hey, I got 2 speeds, on and off.
Love it.
No, this has been awesome, and I really appreciate y'all so much.
Yes, we're so grateful for you too, and just really grateful to be in this world of making such a big impact, studying with Malilo and working with the Shed Light team as well too. So so some last words before we wrap up for the show. Nikki Burnett, who's the host of Taste Life Nutrition radio show, and us, we've been working on collaborating, putting our energy into an amazing online course for you out there who is wanting to reset your mind, resetting your health, reading your sense of health and well-being. And this is a comprehensive program that is incorporating different pillars of health, from nutrition to mindset to exercise and movement. And so it's an all-inclusive, comprehensive program that's 12 weeks long, and we're excited to be able to launch the first part, which is the sugar detox, on November 9th, which is coming up really soon. And so more details would be posted in our comments section, and we're super excited to continue to roll this out. Nikki we've all been putting our heart and energy into this, so it's our little baby that's been born from COVID. So with that said, be sure to visit our Facebook page. Be sure to send us a private message if you feel like you're needing a jump start, needing a reset, this is a really great way to do it from the comfort of your home and learn some really invaluable information about your own personal health and well-being. And so with that said, the last question that I like to be able to ask you for the day and for all our shows is, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Thank you so much for joining us, and tune in again in 2 weeks, and we will see you soon. Take care.